please, and we'll get the meeting underway. We are at 9:30, so I'm keen to start on time and stay on time today. So this is the continuation of the meeting that we started on Friday, which we adjourned on Friday. We've got a number of submitters that we're hearing from today. We've got 5 minutes for organisations and 3 minutes for individuals. And we start this morning with David Hawke from the Halswell Residents Association. David, thank you for joining us. Please take a seat at the table and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I think Chairman for today. So I'm David Hawke, Secretary, Halswell Residents Association, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. Usually I'd have our Chairman, John Bennett, sitting next to me, but the timeline was pretty tight, and I think you know about timelines. We recognise the situation as a city that we've suddenly found ourselves in, and obviously it's not an easy situation. On the scale of things, we reiterate the points that we made in our submission for the initial version of the draft plan, which seems a long time ago now. But I guess we're disappointed at the removal from funding of a large number of capital projects. For us, particularly those relating to building community connectedness and livability, so public transport, major cycle routes, parks and reserves. But actually the big question for us is actually not this year's plan, but next year's plan. And that brings us to the question of consultation, which we highlighted also in our initial submission. In an email at this time last week, which already seems a long time ago, you said, quote, that we are planning a more in-depth conversation with our communities about our capital program, unquote, for the long-term plan next year. We note in our original submission that participation in consultations and in voting across our city don't actually presently represent well the diversity of the city. We also have the issue that many people don't know what the City Council does or how to engage with it. On the other hand, there's really good social sciences evidence that people actually do have an interest in the city and they do have an interest in the political process. But people need to be convinced that consultation is real and not just a rubber stamp of decisions already made. One of the things that we really highlight is that this City Council, is capable of running meaningful consultations. So Share an Idea, a decade ago now, and more recently for us in Halswell, the skate park consultation. Those consultations, I think they worked really well, but they actually both had in common genuinely asking people for their ideas. And given the timeline to the long-term plan, this actually needs to start now. So if you're going to have this more in-depth conversation with your communities about the capital program, we think that this is no free lunch. You're going to need some money to do this. So one of the requests or suggestions, you're going to get lots of requests, I'm sure, that you include budget for long-term plan consultation in your final annual plan. And as a postscript, I'd really highlight that City Council doesn't need to do all this on its own. There are lots of civil society groups of all sorts who bring together one way or another an enormous diversity of people. And you can harness these, but just to remind you, you will need to get organised. So thank you very much for listening. Very short talk, but I think the message is pretty clear.
Thank you. So we move to questions. Are there any questions for David? Anne.
Thanks, David. Thanks again for a concise and excellent submission. Just thinking about what you were saying about how we harness different groups and bring them together. Can you give us an example of seeing something really effective, apart from the ones that you've given, in perhaps other countries or throughout, that we could work on?
I'm going to try and make this not sound like a patsy session, but Councillor Galloway runs a community forum in our community, and that brings together people of a very wide range of age groups and ethnicities. I'm trying not to make this sound like a patsy. But I think that's a really good model. If I look across the community boards, Sprayed and Cashmere, if I'm going to pick someone up, they are really good at taking their meetings into the community rather than waiting for the community to come to them. I think that's another really good example of that. And I think for community boards have got a really important role in this as well, and they need to be out there and hearing what their communities are saying in their communities and giving them the chance to stamp their feet and wave their hands.
Great, thank you very much. Now that brings us to the end of the time that we've got this morning. But David, thank you very much indeed for the work that you're doing in your community and for coming along and speaking to us this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much.